As a photographer, I take tons of photos of my family during the holidays. The problem is, because I'm the photographer, I'm actually never in the photos themselves. As my holiday gift to you, I'm going to share my setup and settings that allow me to take group portraits like these, with me in them. No messing around with remotes, no running back and forth with the self timer, and no need to use a complicated app. But before we start, I wanted to take a moment to thank today's video sponsor, Squarespace. I've actually been using Squarespace for over 10 years. Their templates and easy to use interface make it incredibly simple to create and maintain a professional looking website without any coding experience necessary. My Squarespace website was an essential part of how I built my photography business. It allows me to showcase my portfolio, share recent work on my blog, and receive inquiries from potential clients through a contact form. If you're one of those photographers relying on your Instagram profile as the sole place to share your work and build your photography business, I would really consider making a website on Squarespace. You can visit squarespace.com/ReggieBallesteros to start a free trial and get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. To demo this approach, I'll be using the Fujifilm XS20 with the 27mm f2.8 lens and also a Godox flash. But you can use these settings and approach with most camera brands regardless of the lighting situation, even if you're outdoors with no flash. For the exposure, we're going to set our cameras to manual. And the reason for this is we want to lock in the exposure no matter what happens in the frame. If somebody's moving in front of the camera, we don't want that to change based on what the camera thinks, but instead what we as the photographer see as the correct exposure. For my shutter speed, I'm actually going to set this to 1/160th of a second or faster. And the reason for this is you want to make sure that the motion blur or the emotions or the laughter or anything like that is very tack sharp with no motion blur of the subject. As far as the aperture goes, you want to stop down just a little bit in order to make sure that you have all the faces of the group photo in focus. For a photo with just 4 people, you can probably do f4.0. Sometimes you can get away with f2.8, but if you're doing a very large portrait, you might want to stop down to 5.6 or f8 just to ensure all the faces and the different rows are in focus. And for the ISO, I really set the ISO to whatever is needed to expose the image correctly. I don't try to use a super low ISO and push it up in post. I just try to expose the image for what ISO is needed. If I'm using a flash, I actually raise the ISO a little bit in order to be able to not use the full capacity of the flash, because when you do that, you have to wait for a long recycle period for it to recharge. So now let's get to focus. And all these settings are going to be Fujifilm specific settings, but you should be able to find an equivalent on any other camera brand that you're using. So for the focus setting, what I'm actually going to set it to is AFS. You can set this to AFC if your camera is very reliable and continuous, but with Fujifilm cameras, they're actually more reliable on AFS. So I put it on AF single, and I'm going to set the actual zone to be a wide tracking zone. So it's going to look for the entire frame for any faces. And that's because I'm going to turn on face and eye detect to auto. And what this does is going to allow it to track any faces in the frame, which is going to be my family members, my kids and my wife and me. The second most important setting to pull this off is actually to turn on what's called pre-AF on Fujifilm. And pre-AF, basically when you turn this on, it's going to always look for focus on your camera, even if you're not half pressing the shutter. The last setting that we're going to set up is the most important one, and it is not using a self timer, but instead we're going to use the interval timer shooting mode of our camera. So what we're going to do is go into the menu and go to the shooting area, and then we're going to go to the interval timer shooting mode. We're going to go in here. I usually set the interval to 1 second. In this case of this particular demo, I set it to 2 seconds because I'm using flash and I didn't want it to get to the point where I was putting my flash at full capacity to have the full recharge. So I set it to 2 seconds because I use a lower flash power. And then I set number of times to infinity. And when you set the camera to infinity and you press OK, it's just going to continue shooting until we finally get the shot. So what I usually do is I set the interval timer, I let it start. I get into frame, I give some directions to my kids, or I tell everyone to just look at the lens and be silly, and I just wait for a little bit until I know for sure that maybe I got at least 1 frame. And then I go back and I press OK to turn it off, and then I review the photos. And yes, you're going to get some bad frames at the start and at the end, but it's really the middle shots that count, and because we're photographing with digital, you're able to pick the best frame. During the holidays or even on vacation, really try out this method and let me know how it works for you. And with that, my name is Reggie Ballesteros. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you loved it, subscribe for more.